In the summer of 1941, an invading army walked away with a room valued today at over $500 million. They packed the walls into crates, shipped them across an entire continent, and just 3 years later, the entire room vanished. To understand how a single room could be worth $500 million, you have to look at the material itself. Baltic amber is fossilized tree sap that flowed from massive pine forests 44 million years ago. It functions like a natural time capsule, preserving ancient insects and transmitting light with a warm, almost supernatural golden glow. Prussian craftsmen used more than 6 tons of this rare fossilized resin to construct an entire chamber in 1701. The amber room was later presented to Russian Tsar Peter the Great to seal a military alliance. This was a 55-square-meter natural time capsule, shaped by master craftsmen over decades. The panels were backed with gold leaf and inlaid with Florentine stone mosaics. Its destruction would mean the loss of an irreplaceable piece of human heritage. When Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in June of 1941, he sent 3 million German soldiers into the Soviet Union. Alongside the military invasion, the Nazi regime carried out the largest industrialized bureaucratic art theft in human history. The Amber Room was explicitly targeted. Nazi leadership carried a document known as the Kümmel Report, a comprehensive catalog of foreign artworks compiled by German art historians. Nazi ideology claimed they were legally repatriating German-crafted art back to the Reich, regardless of treaties signed centuries earlier. As the German army approached the Catherine Palace near Leningrad, Russian art curators scrambled to evacuate the room. But after 2 centuries of exposure, the fossilized resin had dried out completely. The moment they tried to pry the amber from the walls, it began crumbling into dust. Desperate, the curators covered the glowing walls with thin layers of ordinary wallpaper and cotton batting, praying the invading soldiers wouldn't look too close. The disguise failed immediately. German soldiers, supervised by 2 specialized art experts, stripped the room down to bare brick. They packed 6 tons of delicate amber into 27 wooden crates and shipped them to Königsberg Castle on the Baltic coast, reassembling the room as a trophy of wartime conquest. An architectural masterpiece that had survived 225 years of empires, czars, and revolutions was systematically dismantled in just 36 hours. The room remained on public display in Germany for nearly 2 years. Then the war turned. By August of 1944, the Royal Air Force launched devastating incendiary bombing raids directly over Königsberg. The historic city center, including the castle where the amber room was stored, was completely gutted by fire. The Battle of Königsberg ended in April of 1945, when Soviet investigators finally entered the castle basement. The amber was gone. The only physical evidence recovered from the ashes were the scorched remains of the room's Italian stone mosaics. This points to the most heavily documented conclusion: destruction by fire. Amber possessed a fatal chemical weakness. Because it is fossilized tree resin, it is highly combustible. When exposed to the extreme heat of an incendiary bombing raid, it doesn't melt into a recoverable material. It burns away entirely, leaving behind nothing but smoke with an incense-like scent. Despite their own expert concluding the room had burned, the Soviet State Security Agency, the KGB, conducted exhaustive decades-long searches for the panels. Declassified archives suggest the Soviets feared their own artillery strikes may have accidentally destroyed the room during the siege, and they needed to maintain complete control over that information. The smoldering ruins of Königsberg created the perfect void. Both nations exploited the ambiguity, using the missing room as a powerful Cold War propaganda symbol, rather than publicly accepting its likely destruction. Investigators who reject the fire theory look underground. During the chaotic final months of the war, Nazi SS units routinely utilized deep salt mines and reinforced subterranean bunkers to hoard looted cultural artifacts away from the advancing Allied forces. This map shows the massive scale of unmapped Nazi infrastructure stretching across the Kaliningrad and northern Poland regions. Königsberg was a medieval fortress city sitting on top of centuries of sealed vaults and tunnels that remain entirely unsurveyed to this day. The underground theory is entirely active. In 2024, geophysicists surveying a former SS training ground at Dmiany conducted ground-penetrating radar scans. They identified distinct man-made rectangular voids hidden deep beneath the soil in areas known to have processed massive quantities of looted art during the German retreat. Because hundreds of miles of Nazi underground infrastructure remain physically sealed and unexplored, historians still cannot definitively prove the crates aren't buried somewhere down there in the darkness. The third major theory follows the panicked maritime evacuation of East Prussia in early 1945. More than 1 million civilians and soldiers fled toward the Baltic coast to escape the advancing Soviet army. Surviving eyewitnesses reported seeing massive, heavily guarded wooden crates matching the amber room's exact dimensions being loaded onto doomed transport ships. One of the primary suspects was the Wilhelm Gustloff, a massive steamer torpedoed by a Soviet submarine, carrying its unverified cargo to the bottom of the sea. Hope surged around the world in 2020 when dive teams located the remarkably intact wreck of the SS Karlsruhe, the final steamer to leave Königsberg. But when divers finally opened its sealed cargo holds in 2021, the crates contained only standard military equipment and personal belongings. Even if a shipwreck is eventually discovered carrying the correct crates, conservation scientists point to a brutal reality. Amber is highly vulnerable to osmotic stress. 80 years of immersion in corrosive saltwater combined with biological colonization would have completely degraded the panels into an unrecognizable brittle sludge. If the Baltic Sea is hiding the amber room, it is hiding a corpse. The magic of the material disappeared decades ago. The 80-year hunt for the amber room has carried a severe human cost. A former German soldier turned amateur historian was found murdered in a Bavarian forest. The deputy head of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service died in a suspicious car crash while his contacts were investigating the room. Time and again, men claiming to be on the verge of a breakthrough have met violent ends. In 1979, the Soviet government quietly accepted defeat. They commissioned an enormous project to build a replica entirely from scratch. It required 24 years of labor and millions of dollars to painstakingly recreate the exact 18th century techniques used by the original Prussian masters. Today, hundreds of thousands of visitors enter the Catherine Palace and stand inside a perfectly scaled, dazzlingly bright chamber. But every tour guide eventually points out the painful truth: the room is an immaculate fake. The original 44-million-year-old resin is nowhere to be found. A room that took a decade to build, served as royal currency, and survived 2 centuries of warfare was erased in a single weekend. Whether the original panels burned into ash, decayed at the bottom of the sea, or remained sealed inside a concrete bunker somewhere in the dark, the amber room stands as undeniable proof that human conflict can erase the irreplaceable in an instant, leaving behind only ghosts, dead men, and a $500 million question mark.